Our next speaker, we're really happy to have you here because I know you had some travel woes getting here. So his bank has held my money for 40 years, but not my cryptocurrency yet. Please welcome Geoff Brady, Head of Global Trade and Supply Chain Finance at Bank of America. Geoff.
So thanks, and thank you to USC Marshall. Bank of America, we're delighted to be here this year. I think this is the first time we're a sponsor and involved, and I think, we've seen a little bit more of a shift towards the financial supply chain, so we're anxious to talk a little bit about that. I've only got one slide that I put together, and I was talking with one of my colleagues, and I started going through it, and he said, it looks a little different. I said, yeah, the good people at USC are really good about this. They sort of, reformat, and they got the USC colors, and everything looks really pretty. And I said, and they put a cover slide on it. And he said, is that the cover slide? I said, yeah. He goes, well, how sometimes people want to start out with like a funny story or an anecdote? He said, I don't think you got to do that, do you? Because that picture's pretty funny. It takes up 3/4 of the page. And I said, yeah, noted. So I think afterwards I said, I'm going to show this to my mom, because I think she'll be impressed that my picture takes up 3/4 of the page. But I will tell you a little bit of a funny story, not so funny, but I was in New York last night. I'm based in New York, and I live in Brooklyn. And I was at the airport, thunderstorms, and the airport shut down for a long time. So I was in the airport, my 8-year-old FaceTiming while I'm in the airport. And he said, Dad, where are you going again? I said, I'm going to Los Angeles. He goes, oh, Los Angeles. I said, Dad, you gonna let him have it? You gonna give him a hard time? And I'm like, what? He goes, the Dodgers. You took the Dodgers, Brooklyn. I didn't even know he knew that. He's 8 years old. And I just assumed he learned it on YouTube, which is where he gets most of his information, which I feel confident is exactly where he learned it. So I said, well, look, pal, it's not 1958, so I think I'm going to give him a pass, buddy. I said, also, he's a Jets fan, so I said, Sam Darnold, he's from USC. He goes, he is? I said, yeah. He goes, all right, don't say anything. Don't say anything bad. Don't say anything. So you guys invited the banks this year. Yeah, who did that? Lots of wingtips and ties. It's interesting, as I said, we do a lot of this, and my role is, as was introduced, the head of global trade and supply chain. And you might think to yourself, what do you bankers know about supply chain? What does a bank supply chain look like? And it's not exactly the bank supply chain, it is on behalf of our clients. So as you hear, this is a big topic of interest for us these days, and a big topic of interest for our clients. And we think about the financial supply chain and how we can impact it. And it's a lot of what we do these days. And it's a big part of my business, it's a big part of Bank of America, and I think it's a big part of the industry. Very often, more and more, we're working with our clients across their organizations to be able to sort of look at what are some good solutions and ideas and how we can positively impact the financial supply chain. So one of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about was partnership, this theme of partnership. Now, I'm going to oversimplify this a little bit because there's sort of many different parts to the treasury and procurement organizations, but you'll see I have up here, when you think about your finance goals, you think about your procurement goals. And finance and treasury, and I know what you're thinking, the banker is going to show up and the finance and treasury guy is always going to be the hero of the story. And that's true. But what we've seen, interestingly, is when we work with our clients, and this is something that you may be surprised to hear, often there is not a great partnership between the treasury or finance function and the procurement function. And there's really not going to be an optimal, most efficient supply chain unless you have that partnership. You know, a colleague of mine had a good line, and he used to say, you know, often we'll get called in by one of our clients, and they'll sort of want to talk about how they can maximize the efficiency of their supply chain, their working capital, et cetera. And he used to say, you know, when we walk into the meeting, and at the same company, the treasury guy and the procurement guy are introducing themselves to each other, we're going to be in for a long meeting. And it happens all the time, interestingly. You know, sometimes they don't work on the same floor or the same building or even the same city, right? And they don't do a lot of interacting. But we found, and when we sort of do some of what we do, some of our analysis and some of our consulting, we sort of figure out that really the best supply chains and the most efficient supply chains have this great partnership. As a matter of fact, you know, when we look at some of our financial solutions for supply chain management, and we look at what the most effective ones are and the most effective companies that do this. And you're going to hear a little bit more about this over the next day or two. And a colleague of mine, Fiona DeRue, is going to be running a panel with Restoration Hardware and my friend Chris Cawley from a great company called Talia. And you're going to hear a little bit about sort of the things that we do in this space. And when we looked at what makes this successful financial supply chain, we looked at a number of different factors, right? Because we're finance and bank people, we love to do the regression analysis and sort of look and quantify sort of what makes this effective supply chain. And we looked at how global the company was and how many different locations there were, and how many locations they sourced from, and what industry they were in. But really what we kept coming back to, the highest correlation to a successful financial supply chain, was really the engagement on the part of both treasury and procurement, that partnership. And often that had a sponsorship at the CFO level, so that all the goals were aligned. And you think about that, and again, I'm sort of, I'm simplifying a little bit, but I want to sort of point out a couple of examples. So you think about, you know, partners, and you think about, you know, where the sort of the two can link up. And you think about sort of how you mesh the goals together. Think about something like agile procurement, right? Many of you are familiar with agile procurement. So, and really this is around, it's understanding your exposure, understanding your risks. And you think about some of the sort of key uncertainties that you sort of look at when you think about your procurement organization and your agile procurement. And you think about where there's a sort of a touch point between the finance side and the procurement side. So you think about market-driven volatility. Right? Things like pricing risk, commodity prices, currency prices, you know, hedging costs. All these things are sort of market volatility. And if you think about, you know, energy companies, oil and gas companies, all have to be really tuned into this. And if you think about who are the best, what's the best part of your organization to really identify these risks? It's procurement. Right? Procurement is the ones that are talking to suppliers all day. They've got their eye on the market. They know what the goods are that they need to purchase. If you think about the fluctuations that will come with the volatility, these are the guys that raise their hand and say, here are the red flags. Here's what we need to watch out for. And sort of then they bring that back to the finance and the treasury folks, and they can action those things. Things like hedges, things like, you know, commodity hedges. Think about airlines, or as I said, oil and gas companies. You know, all these things they use to start to mitigate these risks, and a really good partnership between the treasury group and the procurement group. You think about event-driven uncertainty, right? Floods, you know, had one of those at JFK Airport last night. Don't know what the supply chain ramifications were yet, but if your supplier for Keynote speakers was impacted, then we would have known about it. But you think about like coup d'etats, you know, political situations, like all these things, you know, there's something, I've heard rumors there's something going on in China these days. I'm not sure if any of you have heard what this is. So, you know, all those things, you want to mitigate those risks, and often, again, you work with the finance and treasury people, but the procurement folks are the ones on the ground that can really sort of say, hey, this supplier just told me there's this situation we need to be mindful of, and if you think about that, again, the procurement side raising the flag, and then the treasury and the finance side being able to impact it. Supply and upstream uncertainty. So, I'll tell you a quick story. we had a client years ago that, not too long ago, that was a major US manufacturing company. And they had a supplier that was critical to one of their lines. Meaning, if this supplier sort of went away, their entire line would shut down. And they were a part of a vendor finance program that we were running for them. And it was really the procurement folks that had this relationship with this supplier that raised their hand, this vendor, and said, I think we have a problem here. These guys are sort of, having trouble, and we're sort of worried they're skidding towards potentially bankruptcy. So they worked with us, the bank, and sort of came back with the Treasury and Finance folks. And the solutions created, the Treasury group actually went and guaranteed the balance sheet of this supplier, basically guaranteed all the payments of this supplier to all of its suppliers, right, effectively. Put talent from their CFO shop into this supplier shop and basically sort of kept it a going concern so they wouldn't have to shut down one of their lines. The red flag was raised by Treasury, by procurement, but the action was taken by Treasury along with the bank. See, the banks aren't always the bad guys in this situation. You gotta realize, we're here to help sometimes. And I think you'll see this over the next couple of days. And then lastly, if you think about uncertainty, demand or downstream uncertainty, right? So if you're the guy that makes flip phones, maybe not so good. Maybe think about something else. So then we think about where the Treasury guys and finance guys may take the lead. So I want to talk for a second about working capital, and I threw this one slide up here. And again, I'm oversimplifying some of these goals, I guess. Many of you may be procurement professionals, so you may sort of have a exquisitely more intricate list of goals than the one I've just put up there. This is a relatively basic set of traditional goals. And the finance goals as well, there's just a few of them that you see there. And the challenge is, and I think why you don't often see the partnership, is there may be this thought that there are competing interests. Often the procurement guys are looking to say, hey, we're trying to keep costs down, and we're incentivized on that, and that's what our sort of performance is based on, and it's all about costs and supplier relationships, and I don't want to take off my suppliers. And then on the finance side, they've got free cash flow goals, and they want to keep their debt rating clean, and they want to keep their balance sheet clean, and you sort of may think about that as a competing goal. And then we've got sort of that little slice in the middle where we think about working capital, right? Working capital is pretty basic. It's short-term payables, short-term receivables, and then you've got sort of the inventory piece. And if you think about very, very basic strokes, why this is important, you think about, if it costs you $100 to produce something and you sell it for $150, great, you're making a $50 profit, everybody's happy. But if you think about working capital, something as simple as sort of your terms, and you say, okay, well, I pay my suppliers in 30 days. I think that's fair, I think that's the right thing to do, I pay everybody in 30 days. I get paid in 90 days. So what do you got? You got 60 days out there, and you got to figure out how to run your company. You got to hit payroll, you got to keep the lights on, all these things, and it costs capital to do that. And if you think about that, if it costs you $1 a day to sort of keep the lights on in your company, and it get you to 60 days to get paid, that's $60. You just blew out your profits, now you're losing money. And that's something that you sort of wouldn't think about when you think about, am I profitable or not profitable? It's working capital, right? You think about the cost of capital. Total industry cost of capital, roughly, is a study done by Hackett Group and NYU. I know what you're thinking, NYU, what do they know? Where's their marching band? But they estimate that cost of capital for total market, if you take out the financial companies, is about 8.2%, right? 8.2%. That's a lot. That costs a lot to run a company every day. Cost of capital to run your company. So think about that. How important working capital is in your profitability to your company, right? For a supply chain to be efficient, you want to do your best to match up those payment terms. So if you think about the flip side of my example, if you pay your suppliers in 90 days, but you get paid in 30 days, that's 60 days of cash that you can do what you will. You can invest it, you can buy back stock, you can pay down debt, you can do short-term investments. So all these things are sort of accretive to your bottom line, to your balance sheet. And just to sort of illustrate this a little bit, if you think about certain industries, I think technology and electronics and certain elements of manufacturing, their procurement spend is about 50% of their total revenue. I think that's from the Hackett Group as well. And if you think about that, and you think about an 8.2% capital, if you've got that 60-day window you have to fund yourself, and it costs you 8.2%, and you're a $5 billion company, you're getting up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. So it's really, really impactful. We hear stories often where we'll talk to companies and you'll have these procurement guys and these treasury guys talking to each other. And it will be sort of a conversation of, well, we want to really focus on working capital because we think this is going to be a big impact for our business, and we think it's going to be, we see the value of this. And that's where sort of the treasury and the finance teams take the lead. And then on the other side, you got the procurement folks who often will be like, well, I'm judged on costs. So, my supplier came to me and said, look, I get it, you want to push my terms out, and you don't want to pay me for 30 days, you want to pay me in 90 days, but how about I give you a little bit of a price break? Well, the example I used earlier, you got to be real careful about the price break that you're going to get when it's costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars per day. So the point of this is just to say, you got to be really careful when you do something like trading terms for cost without sort of having that synergy between treasury and procurement. It's really, really important. And how you can do that is you can align your goals, right? Align your goals and your incentives. And I know this is scary, but when you think about intra-company aligning your goals, where you don't have a working capital goal just on the finance side, do it on the procurement side as well. And here's a scarier thought. If you can do it inter-company, so you all sort of align down your supply chain with these same goals. Because what a bank brings to the table is often, we clear up some transparency that you don't have. I don't know what my supplier's cost of capital is, he doesn't know what mine is. So we don't know where that optimal point is on the line. But your bank will know, or at least they'll help you know, where is that optimal point? Because we can create some products that will allow your suppliers to get paid faster, but also you to stretch your terms out. You hear about that when you hear the panels that are going on today. And this is why the finance guy and the procurement guy in concert, working together with a provider, is really the best fit for an optimal financial supply chain. And if you can align those incentives, it's really a very clever way to go. So you'll hear about things called supply chain finance, you'll hear about dynamic discounting, some of these things, and I encourage you to pay attention. That's why I think we got the banks involved this year, and we're delighted to be involved. And before I sort of step away, I'll just sort of call out, if any of you haven't met Raul and I, he's our market president out here. And Raul is around, and I'm sure would love to meet most of you, and a real sort of steward for our organization at Bank of America out here on the West Coast. And we've got a big team here from Bank of America. As I said, we're delighted to be here. And before I step away, I'm just going to ask a favor of you guys. If my 8-year-old asks, I gave you hell about the Dodgers. All right? Thank you, USC Marshall. It was great being here.